Admiral Jake Morrison walked through the long hallways of the Galactic Council building. His black uniform was perfectly pressed, and his gray hair was cut short like all military men. Behind him, Captain Lisa Parker carried a briefcase full of reports that no one wanted to read. They had been on this alien world for 3 weeks now, and Jake was getting tired of the same conversations over and over again. The council chamber was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling. Hundreds of different alien species sat in those seats, all talking at once in their own languages. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of living crystal, and a few looked almost human except for their strange colored skin or extra arms. Jake had seen them all before, and he knew what they thought about humans. Jake stepped up to the speaking platform in the center of the room. The noise slowly died down as the aliens noticed him. He could see the looks on their faces, the same looks he had been getting for months. They thought humans were weak. They thought humans were stupid. They thought humans were just another primitive species that barely knew how to fly between stars. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I come before you today to speak about the Kythera Collective and their attacks on peaceful worlds. A sound like laughter came from the insect-like delegates. Ambassador Zekthar, who looked like a giant praying mantis with 4 glowing eyes, clicked his mandibles together. Admiral Morrison, your concerns have been noted, but surely the established powers of the galaxy can handle this small problem without help from such a young species. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Ambassador, the Kythera have destroyed 17 colonies in the past 6 months. They have enslaved over 3 million beings. They are not a small problem. Perhaps not, said Chancellor Mordoon, whose body was made of living purple crystal that changed colors as he spoke. But your species has been in space for barely 100 years. What could you possibly do that our ancient civilizations cannot? More laughter filled the chamber. Jake looked around at faces that showed nothing but contempt. These beings had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Their technology was old but reliable. Their fleets were large and experienced. They could not imagine that humans might have something they did not. Captain Parker shifted behind him, and Jake knew she was thinking the same thing he was. They had both read the classified reports from Earth. They knew what humanity was really capable of, but their orders were clear. Keep trying diplomacy. Keep offering help through proper channels. Do not reveal the true strength of Earth's military. The Kythera are moving toward human space, Jake continued. Our colonies are in their path. We have offered to work with the Galactic Defense Force. We have offered our ships, our resources, our soldiers. All we ask is that the Council coordinate a joint response to stop these attacks. Your ships? The voice came from General Vextar, a reptilian being with scales that reflected light like mirrors. Intelligence reports show humans have perhaps 30 or 40 warships total. The Kythera field fleets of hundreds. Our numbers may be smaller, Jake said carefully, but our capabilities might surprise you. This brought even more laughter. A delegate who looked like a giant jellyfish floating in a water tank made bubbling sounds that Jake's translator turned into mocking comments about human arrogance. Jake took a deep breath. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought in 3 different wars before humanity made contact with alien life. He had seen what human weapons could do, especially the new ones that were still classified above his security level, but he also knew the value of restraint. Sometimes the strongest thing you could do was hold back. Members of the Council, he said, raising his voice slightly. Humanity has been a peaceful member of this community for 15 years. We have followed galactic law. We have respected your customs. We have tried to solve problems through diplomacy and cooperation, as is proper for a junior species, clicked Ambassador Zekthar. But our people are dying, Jake continued. Our colonies are burning, and you sit here debating proper procedures while innocent beings suffer. Chancellor Mordoon's crystal body pulsed with annoyed orange light. Admiral, surely you understand that galactic politics cannot be rushed. These matters require careful consideration of all factors. How much consideration do the slaves in Kythera camps deserve? Jake asked. How much time do the families watching their worlds burn have to wait? The chamber erupted in angry voices. Delegates shouted about human rudeness and lack of respect for galactic tradition. Jake stood calmly in the center of it all, waiting for the noise to die down. When quiet finally returned, he spoke again. I want to be very clear about what I am telling you today. This is not a request for permission. This is not a plea for help. This is a warning. The word warning seemed to surprise them. The aliens looked at each other with confusion. What could humans possibly warn them about? Humanity has spent the last century developing our military while maintaining peace with all our neighbors. We have shown restraint because we believed in working together with the galactic community. But that restraint has limits. Jake paused, looking around the chamber at faces that were no longer laughing. If the Galactic Council will not act to stop the Kythera Collective, then Earth will be forced to abandon our policy of limited engagement. Limited engagement? General Vextar's scales flickered with amused light. Your entire species has fewer ships than a single-sector defense fleet. Jake met the general's eyes without blinking. We have been very careful to be good neighbors. We have held back our true capabilities in the interest of galactic stability. But if you will not help us protect innocent lives, then we will handle this matter ourselves. The laughter that followed was louder than before. Delegates made jokes about human delusions of grandeur. Some wondered if humans were mentally capable of understanding their place in the galaxy. Jake waited for the noise to fade, then spoke, his final words to the council. This is your last chance to be part of the solution. When the history of this war is written, it will show that Earth came to you first. It will show that we tried diplomacy, and it will show that you laughed. As Jake and Captain Parker walked out of the chamber, the mocking voices followed them into the hallway. None of the aliens noticed the small recording device that Parker activated as they left. None of them paid attention to the coded message Jake sent to Earth Command from his personal communicator. 3 days later, when the first Kythera battle fleet moved to attack a human world, they would discover exactly what humanity had been holding back for so long. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had been so polite, so patient, and so careful to follow the rules. They were about to learn what happened when Earth stopped playing nice. The alarm bells on New Denver Colony started ringing at exactly 0347 local time. Mary Sullivan was feeding her baby when the first warning came through her house speakers. She looked out her kitchen window and saw the bright flashes in space. That meant trouble was coming. 47 Kythera warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Denver system. Admiral Zekron commanded the fleet from his flagship, a massive vessel that looked like a giant metal insect with weapons covering its hull. His orders were simple: destroy the human colony, take the survivors as slaves, show the galaxy what happened to species that refused to bow to Kythera power. The intelligence reports had been clear. New Denver was defended by one small patrol ship and a handful of orbital defense platforms. The humans had maybe 50 fighters and a few hundred soldiers on the ground. It would be an easy victory like all the others. What the Kythera did not know was that Colonel Danny Wright had been waiting for them. His ship, the Retribution, sat hidden in the asteroid belt that surrounded the system. The ship was completely dark, its engines cold, its weapons powered down. Special stealth technology made it invisible to Kythera sensors. Danny had been sitting in that asteroid field for 2 weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. Sir, enemy fleet is moving into attack. Formation, reported Lieutenant Amy Harrison from her station. 47 ships total, mostly cruisers and destroyers with 3 heavy battleships. Danny nodded calmly. He had been a soldier for 20 years, but this was his first chance to use the new weapons that Earth had been developing in secret. The Retribution looked like a normal human ship from the outside, but its weapons were 20 years ahead of anything the galaxy had ever seen. All stations, prepare for combat, Danny ordered. Remember, we are not just fighting for New Denver. We are showing the galaxy what happens when you threaten human lives. The Kythera fleet spread out as they approached the colony. Their ships were huge and intimidating, covered in armor plating and weapon turrets. They had been designed to scare enemies into surrender without a fight. Against most species, this worked perfectly. Admiral Zekron stood on his bridge, watching the human colony grow larger on his screens. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Destroy their defenses first, then target the population centers." The first wave of Cathera plasma bolts raced toward the orbital platforms. The humans returned fire with their conventional weapons, but their small guns barely scratched the thick Cathera armor. Everything was going exactly as planned. Then the Retribution opened fire. The first quantum torpedo hit Zekron's flagship before anyone on board even knew they were under attack. The weapon did not just explode like a normal missile. Instead, it broke apart the very atoms that made up the ship's hull. In 3 seconds, a kilometer-long battleship turned into a cloud of scattered particles. 17 more Cathera ships disappeared in the next 30 seconds. The crews barely had time to scream before their vessels were reduced to dust and energy. The remaining ships turned in panic, trying to find an enemy they could not see. "Where are they?" screamed Captain Vexilon from his cruiser. "Sensors show nothing. How can they be firing at us?" The answer came from Captain Tony Garcia, who brought the 7th Fleet out of hyperspace right in the middle of the Cathera formation. 23 human ships appeared like ghosts, their hulls shimmering with adaptive armor that changed color and texture to match their surroundings. The Cathera opened fire immediately, their plasma cannons lighting up space with deadly energy. But something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the plasma bolts like sponges, their armor glowing briefly before returning to normal. Then they fired back, and the Cathera learned what real weapons looked like. Tony's flagship, the Washington, fired a single shot from its main cannon. The beam cut through a Cathera cruiser like it was made of paper, slicing the ship in half without even slowing down. The weapon continued through space and destroyed 2 more ships behind the first one. "What kind of weapons are those?" gasped Lieutenant Kexvar from his dying ship. "Our armor is useless against them." The human ships moved like dancers, flowing around the Cathera fleet with impossible grace. Their weapons fired constantly, each shot destroying or crippling an enemy vessel. The Cathera had never seen anything like it. Their 1,000-year-old tactics were useless against technology they could not understand. Colonel Wright watched the battle from his hidden position, marking targets for the fleet to engage. "Clean sweep," he reported to Tony. "No survivors, no witnesses. Make sure the galaxy knows what happened here." The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, 47 Cathera ships had been reduced to glowing debris. Not a single human vessel had been lost. The casualty report showed 12 wounded humans and 0 dead. On New Denver, Mary Sullivan watched the lights fade from her kitchen window. Her baby had stopped crying and was now sleeping peacefully in her arms. The attack was over, and somehow, impossibly, they had won. But the real shock was yet to come. As news of the battle spread across the galaxy, monitoring stations and intelligence, networks tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. The humans had not just won. They had dominated completely, using weapons and tactics that seemed to come from 100 years in the future. On Earth, President Karen Thompson walked into the Oval Office where cameras were waiting. Behind her, through the windows, hundreds of ships were lifting off from hidden bases around the planet. Each vessel carried weapons that would make the Retribution look like a toy. "My fellow humans, and to all beings listening across the galaxy," she began, her voice calm but firm. "For too long, we have watched innocent people suffer while the galactic community debated and delayed. No more." She looked directly into the camera, knowing that her words would be heard on 1,000 worlds within hours. "As of this moment, Earth is implementing Operation Righteous Fury. We will find every Cathera fleet. We will locate every occupied world. We will free every slave, camp, and we will end this war." The ships rising behind her were just the first wave. In hidden shipyards throughout human space, more vessels were being prepared. Weapons that had been tested in secret for decades were finally ready for combat. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been holding back not because they were weak, but because they were trying to be kind. Admiral Zekron's final transmission, sent just before his ship was destroyed, reached Kithara, High Command, 6 hours later. His last words were simple and terrifying. The humans were not what we thought they were. They were never what we thought they were. The war room deep inside Kithara Prime was filled with panic. General Tekvar stared at the holographic display showing red marks across 3 sectors of space. Each red mark represented a destroyed Kithara military base. In just 72 hours, the humans had hit 47 targets at the same time. "How is this possible?" demanded Supreme Commander Nalthek, his 4 arms gesturing wildly at the display. "Our intelligence said humans had maybe 30 ships total. How did they attack 47 locations at once?" The answer was simple, but none of the Kithara leaders wanted to believe it. Human intelligence had been wrong for 15 years. Every report, every spy, every captured human had told them the same story. Humanity was a small, weak species with limited military power, but that had all been lies. Across the galaxy, Admiral Kevin Taylor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Sovereign. The ship was 1.5 kilometers long, covered in weapons that most species could not even name. Around him, Task Force Alpha consisted of 200 human warships, the largest fleet ever assembled by Earth. Intelligence reports show 300 Kithara ships defending their home system, reported Commander Rachel Stone. They have pulled back most of their frontier fleets to make their last stand here. Kevin nodded as he studied the tactical display. The Kithara had made the same mistake as everyone else. They thought numbers mattered more than technology. They thought old tactics could beat new weapons. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Signal all ships," Kevin ordered. "Operation Hammerfall begins now." The human fleet moved forward in perfect coordination. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. Their movements looked like a dance, with vessels flowing around each other in 3-dimensional space. The Kithara had never seen anything like it. On the Kithara command ship, Sensors Officer Yektal watched his screens with growing fear. "Sir, the human ships are not following any known attack pattern. They are moving in ways that should be impossible." Supreme Commander Nalthek gripped his command chair with all 4 hands. "All ships, open fire. Destroy them before they can get closer." 300 Kithara ships fired at once. The space between the fleets filled with plasma bolts, energy beams, and explosive missiles. It was the largest display of firepower in galactic history. Any normal fleet would have been vaporized instantly, but the human ships flowed around the incoming fire like water around rocks. Their hulls shimmered and changed, absorbing some attacks and deflecting others. Not a single human vessel was destroyed in the opening barrage. Then humanity showed the galaxy what total war really meant. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Martinez commanded the Marine assault ship Washington as it launched the first wave of human weapons. These were not the guns and missiles that other species used. These were devices that worked by changing the basic laws of physics. The Singularity missiles created tiny black holes that lasted just long enough to tear apart everything within 1 kilometer. The quantum disruptors phased through shields and armor as if they were not there. The plasma lances burned with the heat of stellar cores, turning battleships into clouds of vapor. "This is not a battle," Steve muttered to his second-in-command. "This is an execution." The Kithara ships tried to fight back, but their weapons were 1,000 years old. Their tactics had not changed in centuries. Against human technology, they might as well have been throwing rocks at starships. One by one, the Kithara vessels simply stopped existing. Some were torn apart by gravity weapons. Others were disintegrated by energy beams that worked at the atomic level. A few just vanished when quantum torpedoes erased them from reality itself. Captain Lisa Parker, now promoted to admiral after the diplomatic incident, watched from her command ship as the enemy fleet was destroyed. "Casualty report," she requested. 17 wounded, no deaths," came the reply. "Enemy losses are total. No surviving vessels." But the real surprise came when the human fleet did not stop at destroying ships. Using precision strikes, they targeted every Kithara slave camp in the system. Rescue ships landed on 3 occupied worlds, bringing medical supplies and food to millions of prisoners. Dr. Janet Mills led the medical team that landed on Kithara 7, a planet where the insect aliens had been mining rare metals using slave labor. She found beings from dozens of different species, all starving and sick from years of abuse. "How many?" she asked her assistant as they set up the emergency hospital. "Over 2 million prisoners on this planet alone," came the answer. "Most have been here for years. Some were captured as children and have never known freedom." Janet worked for 18 hours straight, treating injuries and diseases that should have been handled years ago. Around her, human soldiers distributed food and water while engineers began dismantling the slave camps. News of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light. On the Galactic Council station, emergency meetings were called as species leaders tried to understand what had happened. The same aliens who had laughed at Admiral Morrison 3 weeks earlier now faced a terrible truth. Ambassador Zekthar sat in his private chambers, reading intelligence reports with all 4 eyes. The humans had not just won a battle, they had ended a war that had lasted 2 years in less than a week. Their technology was so advanced that other species could barely understand how it worked. Chancellor Morden's crystal body pulsed with nervous purple light as he spoke to his advisors. "How did we get this so wrong? Our spies, our intelligence networks, our military analysts, they all said humans were weak." The answer came from General Vexitar, whose scales had lost their reflective shine. They were not weak. They were holding back. Everything we saw, every ship we counted, every weapon we cataloged, it was all just a small part of their real strength. On Earth, President Thompson addressed the world from the White House. Behind her, more ships continued to launch, from hidden bases that most people had never known existed. The planet's real military power was finally being revealed. "The Kythera Collective has surrendered," she announced. "Their leaders are being held for trial. Their slaves are being freed and given medical care. Their military has been disbanded, permanently." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "But this war has taught us something important. The galaxy is not as peaceful as we hoped. There are other species out there who prey on the weak and innocent. From today forward, humanity will no longer hide our true capabilities." In deep space, more human fleets were already moving toward their next targets. 7 other aggressive civilizations had been identified as threats to galactic peace. Soon they would discover what the Kythera had learned too late. Earth had tried diplomacy. Earth had tried cooperation. Earth had tried being patient and polite. Now Earth was done playing by the old rules. 6 months after Admiral Morrison's first warning, the Galactic Council met again. The same chamber that had once echoed with mocking laughter was now filled with nervous whispers and fearful glances. The alien delegates who had dismissed humanity as primitive now sat quietly in their seats waiting to hear what Earth wanted from them. The holographic displays around the chamber told the story of how much had changed. Where once there had been red zones marking dangerous space controlled by pirates and slavers, now there were blue zones showing human patrol routes. Trade ships that had not dared to travel certain routes for decades were now moving freely under human protection. Admiral Morrison walked to the center of the chamber, but this time no one laughed. Behind him, Admiral Parker carried new reports that showed the current state of the galaxy. Every delegate had already read similar reports from their own intelligence services, but seeing the numbers together was still shocking. "The war is over," Morrison announced in the same calm voice he had used 6 months earlier. "The Kythera Collective no longer exists. Their leaders have been tried and sentenced for crimes against innocent beings. Their former slaves have been freed and are receiving help to rebuild their lives." Chancellor Morden's crystal body flickered with nervous colors. "Admiral Morrison, we must discuss what your actions mean for the rest of us. Your species has shown military power that we did not know existed. The entire balance of the galaxy has changed." Morrison looked around the chamber at faces that were no longer arrogant but afraid. "Chancellor, there is no balance of power anymore. There is only peace, maintained by those who have the strength and will to protect it." Ambassador Zekthar leaned forward, his 4 eyes wide with worry. "What does humanity want from us? What are your demands?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Every species in the chamber was thinking the same thing. Throughout galactic history, when one civilization became powerful enough to dominate others, they always demanded tribute, territory, or submission. The strong always took from the weak. President Thompson's voice came through the communication link from Earth, broadcast to every delegate in the chamber. We want the same thing we have always wanted: peace between species, protection for the innocent, the freedom to trade and explore without fear of attack. General Vextar's scales rippled with confusion. But surely you must want something more: territory, resources, control over trade routes? Morrison shook his head. We want what we told you 6 months ago. We want to live in a galaxy where families do not have to fear slavers, where children can grow up without worrying about their worlds being attacked, where different species can work together instead of fighting each other. The delegates looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. This was not how galactic politics worked. The powerful always used their strength to gain more power. It was the natural order of things. Admiral Parker stepped forward with a data pad in her hand. Humanity is creating the Terran Peacekeeping Force. Any species that wants to join our alliance will be protected from attack and given access to our trade networks. Those who prefer to remain neutral will be left alone as long as they do not threaten others. She paused, looking around the chamber. And those who prey on innocent beings will be dealt with quickly and permanently. The delegates knew she was not making an empty threat. In the past 6 months, 7 different aggressive civilizations had simply disappeared. Their fleets had been destroyed, their leaders captured, and their territories turned over to the species they had been oppressing. Representative Keldara of the Peaceful Worlds Coalition raised one of her tentacles. What about those of us who have been neutral? We have not attacked anyone, but we have also not helped stop the attackers. Morrison's expression softened slightly. The past is the past. What matters now is the future. We judge species by their actions from this day forward, not by what they did or did not do before. The relief in the chamber was almost visible. Dozens of species had been worried that humanity would punish them for their previous inaction. Instead, they were being offered a fresh start, but not everyone was ready to accept the new reality. Ambassador Felkron of the hegemony stood up, his mechanical body clicking and whirring. You expect us to simply accept human dominance? To bow to a species that has existed in space for barely a century? The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew that the hegemony had been one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy before humanity revealed their true strength. If anyone was going to challenge the new order, it would be them. Morrison looked at Felkron calmly. We do not expect you to bow to anyone. We expect you to follow the same rules that apply to everyone else. Do not attack peaceful worlds. Do not enslave other beings. Do not prey on the weak. And if we refuse? Felkron demanded. Admiral Parker touched a control on her data pad. The holographic displays changed to show a detailed scan of the hegemony's home system. Every ship, every station, every defense platform was clearly marked. Then you will join the Cathara in the history books, she said simply. Felkron looked at the displays, then at the faces of the other delegates. No one was going to help him if he chose to fight. Slowly, he sat back down without another word. The meeting continued for several more hours, but the real business was already finished. One by one, species representatives asked about joining the Terran Peacekeeping Force. Others requested trade agreements or protection pacts. A few asked for help dealing with internal problems that had been ignored for years. As the session ended, Morrison found himself surrounded by delegates who wanted to speak with him privately. The same beings who had mocked him 6 months ago now sought his approval and friendship. Admiral, Chancellor Morden approached with his crystal body pulsing grateful blue light. I must apologize for how we treated you before. We did not understand. Morrison nodded politely. No apology is needed, Chancellor. You acted according to the information you had. Now you have better information. 3 years later, the galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in over 1,000 years. The Terran Peacekeeping Force included over 200 species. Human technology had brought new medicines to dozens of worlds and improved farming on hundreds more. The phrase "Earth warned us" had become a common saying among species who had learned to take human words seriously. But in the deepest vaults of human military command, new weapons were still being developed. Plans for even more advanced ships were being drawn. Research into technologies that could reshape reality itself continued in secret laboratories. The files were marked with a simple note that every human officer understood. In case we need to hold back even less next time.